All right, part 3. Now we're going to look at shooting. We need some interaction between our player and our enemy, and typically that comes in the form of some kind of violence. We are going to not be shooting a gun, we're going to shoot a marker. And we're not going to be shooting bullets, we're going to shoot ink, just so we don't hurt anyone's feelings. So first we're going to create a new sprite. And we're going to call it marker. And then we're going to import from our GameMaker assets our marker. There's my marker. Now I don't want my origin to be at the middle center, but I also don't want it to be at the top left corner. All I want you to do is change that 14 to a 10. So the origin is at the point 10, 4. Kind of right there, you can see it. Kind of where that marker would balance if we were holding it with one hand. Then we'll create an object for our marker, obj_marker, and we'll use our marker sprite. Then we will go to our room create a new layer, and we want this to be above our player. So we're going to have player selected, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this marker. And with that selected, we're going to pull a marker object. We're going to pull a marker object over and just place it in our room somewhere close to the player. Not on the player, just somewhere close to the player. I'm going to lock that because I'm only going to have one marker. I'm going to open my marker object. I'm going to add a step event, but this will be a begin step. Now we've been using step, just our generic step event, and now we're going to use a begin step. Each step is very, very fast in our world of time. There are 60 steps in a second. Probably that's so fast you couldn't even snap your fingers 60 times in a second. You probably couldn't clap 60 times in a second. You know, could you blink your eyes 60 times in a second? I don't know. But in the computer world, each step is actually pretty long because your computer runs really fast and it can process a lot more than 60 things in a second. So we actually have 3 different kinds of step events. There's a begin step, which happens at the beginning of each step. There is an end step, which happens at the end of each step. And then there's the normal step event that happens in between those. So this time we're going to look at a begin step so that before anything else happens in this step, this code will run. And what we're going to do here is we want to move the marker to the player. So basically, what we're trying to do is match our player's position. And we'll do that, remember X, because we're in the marker object, X belongs to our marker, so that's our marker's X. We're going to set that equal to our player's X. We write player.x. And we'll set the Y equal to player's Y, which I will do by copy and paste because I don't like to do all that typing. So that's going to line up our marker's center or marker's origin with our player's origin. We'll see how that works. If we need to adjust it, we will. So let's run it. And when our player falls down, okay, so there's our marker. It's kind of a bit too high. So I'm going to move it down a little bit. We're going to end this. I'm going to move it down a little bit. Remember that moving down means that we need to add, and I'm going to move it down 10 and run again and see if that works. Okay, I like that better. It looks like he's holding that at chest level. That's a good position. So we're going to leave it at that. Next, I want the marker to point in the direction that our mouse is. So we're going to drag our mouse around the room, and wherever we drag our mouse, that's where we want our projectiles to shoot at. So what we're going to do is underneath of here, we're going to set the image angle, and we're going to set that equal to point underscore direction. We've used that before. Remember that point underscore direction requires 4 parameters. So we need the starting position of where this is going to go from, X, comma, Y, comma. And we need our mouse underscore X and our mouse underscore Y. So that's going to make our marker point in the direction of wherever our mouse cursor happens to be sitting. And it's always going to rotate from its origin point, X, Y. So this will allow us to move our marker around using our mouse. So let's look at that. Okay, so you can see that as I move my marker or my mouse pointer around, the marker moves with it. If I go this way, it kind of looks funny. His hands are like on top of it. So we've got some fixing to do. There, looks odd, but we have the right general idea. Okay, so that's working so far. But now our controls have become kind of awkward. So we've got left and right arrows. We've got the space bar that we need to be using. We've got our mouse that we now need to be dragging. We're going to use our left mouse button to shoot. I'm not so sure I can manage all of that. So we're going to add, not remove, but add to our player step event, because it's going to depend on whether you're left-handed or right-handed, whether you want to use the left and right arrows or you want to use the A and D keys. So we're just going to make it so that you can do either. Oops. I meant to make that bigger. Right now, our key left is tied only to the left arrow key. So we're going to change that so that we could use the left arrow key, or we could use the letter A. Now, 2 vertical bars means or. Remember 2 ampersands, that meant and. 2 vertical bars means or. We don't want these both to have to happen because I don't want to have to hold the left arrow and the A key. I want to be able to use the left arrow or the A key. So we're going to use, again, keyboard underscore check. And this time the key we're checking for, well, it's a letter. So the letters are referenced a little differently. We're going to use ORD and then a parenthesis, double quotes, capital A, quotes, and that parenthesis. So inside, oops. Okay, so we have keyboard check, and it has a parenthesis here and a parenthesis there at the end. And inside of that, in my parameter, instead of VK left or VK right like we had there, we have ORDA. So ORD is another function that requires a parameter, and that parameter has to be string. So we use the double quotes and we put our capital A inside the double quotes. Now I'm going to get rid of all this space that I've added in here because I don't really want that in there. So we either press the left key, the left arrow, or we press the A key. Now, because we have this compound condition here, we really should put all of that in one more set of parentheses. So we've got an open at the front that closes at the very end. We have this open that closes here. We have this open that closes next to the last, and then we have this open that closes third from the end. So we have all of these parentheses, and they're all open and closed. All of our open and closed match. Inside of this set of parentheses, we're taking either this or that. So if this is true, we're going to return a 1, or if that is true, we're going to return a 1. If neither of these are true, we're going to return a 0. So key left will still hold a 1 or a 0. We need to do basically that same thing down here. So I'll copy and paste. And instead of A, we'll be looking for D. So now we can use left or A, right or D. We still have the space. So let's fix the space so that we could actually use the up arrow. Okay, so we're going to add our 2 vertical bars for up. By the way, the 2 vertical bars are above your enter key. They're the shift function of the key directly above enter. So just above enter, there's a key that's actually a backslash, and the shift function of that is the vertical bar. So we got space, or I'm just going to copy that because I kind of want that, except instead of left, we'll use up. So if we're left-handed and we're using our mouse with our left hand, then we're using left, right, and up arrows. And if we're right-handed, using our mouse with our right hand, we're using AD and space. Maybe we'll go ahead and also add the W to this last jump. So I'm going to, we do need to have parentheses around these. So this one's missing an open there. And now this one's missing a close there. So now we're good. But inside of those 2 sets of parentheses, I'm going to do space, 2 vertical bars and a space. I'm going to copy this and put it at the end and change that D to W. And there we go. Let me just put this on multiple lines so that we can look at it a little easier. Okay, so left and right, those are pretty clear. We're using left or A, right or D. But for jumping, I could use the space bar. I could use the up key. Oh, look, I'm glad that I lined those up because remember, we need to be using pressed. So sometimes it's a good idea to line things up so that you can look at them in the overall picture. So we're pressing space, or we're pressing up, or we're pressing W. Be careful that you don't just use check, because that will behave very, very differently. So let's test it. We know that left and right arrows work. They've been working. So I'm going to check A, left works, D, works right, A, D, A, D. I know my space bar was working. Should always double check things just to make sure you didn't mess them up. I'm going to check W, still jumping. I'm going to check my up arrow, still jumping. All right, and then my mouse is working. All right, so now when you get to this point, I want you to raise your hand and let me come and check it, because you don't want to have to back up to this if things aren't working right. I just want to make sure that everyone has this movement working perfectly before you move on. So raise your hand, let me come and check that A, D, and W all work, the space bar, and all three of the arrows, left, right, and up, that all of that works well, and that your marker is tracking where you're pointing your mouse. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is add ink. So we're going to create a new sprite. And we're going to call it ink. And we're going to import the ink strip 2. This again will be a 2-image sprite, but not really animated, because if we run it, you can see that's what it looks like. Okay, that will make you crazy. But we do have a 2-image sprite. The first frame, let's open this for edit. The first frame is this white circle. That's going to be our muzzle flash. And the second frame is actually the ink flying through the air. Notice that our ink is yellow. So that's what we're going to paint our enemies yellow. Okay, so our center is in the middle origin. We're going to leave that there. Up in the top, we're going to speed this up. Right now, it's running at 30 frames per second. We're going to speed this to 60 frames per second, so that that muzzle flash is just really quick, and it doesn't, we don't want it to be super dramatic or super obvious, but we do just want this little flash. Now, that is not the speed that this ink is going to fly through the room. That speed is completely different. This is just looking at how long it will take that first image to flash before we're done. I'm going to open our room. We're going to add another layer. We're going to call this one ink. And we're not going to add any objects to this, because the ink will be created. Just like the power-ups were created in Breakthrough, the ink is going to be created during the run of the game. So back in our ink object, oh, we didn't ever create an object for ink. Well, let's do that. Let's create an object, obj_ink, and use the ink sprite. And in here, we're going to use a new event. It's under Other, and it's called Animation End. Now, Animation End is an event that fires at the end of the first round of animation. So that's going to happen pretty quickly for this, since we only have 2 frames and they're running at 60 frames per second. So that means we'll get 2 steps and we want to end our animation. And in order to end the animation, you should know how to do this. Can you think of it? Hopefully, you remembered that this is image speed. So we're going to set our image speed equal to 0. That's how we end the animation. And just to make sure that our animation stops on the right frame, we're just going to set our image index equal to 1, because again, we want that second frame. Next, we're going to add a collision event with wall. And this time we actually are going to use the collision event, because we're not coding a step event here. We're going to use our collision event, and when our ink runs into the wall, well, we want to destroy the ink. And hopefully you're getting used to the fact that that is instance destroy with an empty parameter, because we are in the ink. It's the ink we want to destroy, not the wall. The ink will not destroy the wall. We just want the ink to disappear. Now we're going to return to our marker. And we're going to add a create event. We need to add a variable called firing delay, and we're going to set that equal to 0. Firing delay is a variable that we will use to make sure that our user cannot spam ink out the end of the marker, because 1, it doesn't look right, and 2, it doesn't seem to be fair. So we're going to make sure that there is a delay between each burst of ink that will come out of our marker. So we're going to go back into our begin step. And this code is kind of complicated. So I'm going to type it fairly slow, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. Okay, so I want to make sure that my user cannot spam the ink. So inside of my marker step event, I'm going to first, I'm going to decrease my firing delay variable by 1. Remember, this subtracts 1 from my firing delay variable. Oops, better make that a comment or we'll have an error. Now it's green. There we go. So that subtracts 1, minus, minus. That's my decrement operator, and it subtracts 1. Then I'm going to look at if my mouse button my left mouse button, I'm going to check to see if my left mouse button is being held down. And if it is, then that will return true. And if it's not, that will return false. So if that's true and my firing delay is less than 0, then I'm going to allow my user to fire. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my firing delay to 5. I'm going to use a Wif statement. Remember, Wif statement allows us to look at code in a different object than the one we're writing this code in. Since we're writing this code in marker, I would like to use some variables that belong to ink, and I could do that with obj underscore ink dot, but it's just a little bit easier to do that with a Wif statement. So what I'm going to do is, first, I'm going to create an instance of ink on a specific layer. Now, we also did this in Breakthrough, where we were creating those power-ups on the fly. So I want to create an instance of ink at the XY location of my marker. So the origin of my marker is where I want to create this ink. And I need it to be on the ink layer. And we're creating ink. So, and I need a close parenthesis. We've got this open that will close there. We've got an open and a close over there. So here we're creating an instance of ink on our ink layer at the origin of our marker, because that's the object we're in, the marker. And now we're going to write code that manipulates variables that belong to that instance of ink. We need to manipulate each individual instance independently because it's likely that you'll have more than one instance of ink in the room at a time, and this will allow us to do that. This allows us to manipulate a specific instance of ink, just this instance of ink, not every instance in the room. We're going to set the speed equal to 25. We're going to set the direction equal to other dot image angle. Now, other is the object that we're in. This is our marker object. So when we write Wif, that's almost like not being in marker anymore. Now we're in ink code. But I want to do something with marker's image angle, and I get that from other. This is setting the ink's direction according to the marker's angle. And that comment just got really long, so I'm going to take that off of there and put it here so it's a little easier to read. So I've set the ink speed. This is the speed of the ink. I've set the speed of this instance of ink, set that speed to 25. Then I'm going to set that ink's direction according to the marker's angle. And remember, the marker's angle is being set according to our mouse pointer. Then finally, I'm going to set the image underscore angle equal to direction. So we have this idea of angle. When we shoot the ink is oblong, it's rectangular. And if it always was in the same angle as the original sprite, it would be flat parallel to the floor, which doesn't really make any sense when we're shooting up. The angle of that sprite should change, and that's what we're doing here. We're setting the angle of the ink to match the direction that it's going, which is also an angle. It is the angle that the marker is held at so that when the ink comes out, it looks realistic. So let's run this code and find out what happens. So remember, we're going to fire with our left mouse button. There it goes. And if I hold the mouse button down, I get this pause. If I just click, 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 it will shoot every time I hit it. But if I hold it down, I will get this pausing action. So I can get, multiple sprays of ink, but they're at a little bit of a delay. So again, let's look at this code. So originally in our create event, we've set our firing delay to 0. The very first step will change our firing delay to a negative number, and it will count down and count down and count down until we click that left mouse button. When we click the left mouse button and the firing delay is negative, which it will be the very first time, we're going to reset the firing delay to 5 this time. We're going to create ink. We're going to shoot that ink at a speed of 25 in the right direction based on the angle of our marker. And then in the next step, we're going to count down. So now firing delay will be 4. We won't be able to shoot because although we might be holding the left mouse button, our firing delay is not negative. So we come back the next step, we count down again. We still won't be able to shoot because our firing delay is 3. Next step, our firing delay becomes 2, can't shoot. Next step, our firing delay becomes 1, can't shoot. Next step, our firing delay becomes 0, we still can't shoot. But the next step, our firing delay will be -1, so we will be able to shoot again, assuming we're holding the mouse button. We won't just automatically shoot. If we're not holding the mouse button, we'll just continue to count down. But that little bit of a delay is enough to make it obvious what we're shooting. So let's just look at that again. Let's watch the muzzle flash. So when I shoot, you can see a little bit of a muzzle flash. It's kind of hard to see except when maybe over his head because you can see the white. There is enough of a muzzle flash that you can see the shoot, the bullets come out. On the white background, you can't see it, but if you do it over his face, you can see that little bit of white flash right there, and that's our muzzle flash. So, again, kind of complicated code, but hopefully you understand what's going on there. Now, we're really close to being finished, except remember we kind of looked at the spin of the marker. Okay, so here his hand is underneath of the marker. You can see his little hand right there underneath of the marker. So it looks like he's holding it. But if we go all the way around his head, his arm, it looks like his arm is turned upside down. It looks very awkward. So we're going to fix that. I'm going to take care of that. And we're going to do that by adding an if statement at the end of our begin step. So after all that code that we just did to prevent the user from spamming, which we should really put a comment up there. Prevent our user from spamming ink. Underneath of here, we're going to flip the marker image to look more natural. When pointing left. Okay, so we're going to look to see if our image underscore angle is greater than 90. Remember, 90 is straight up. So if our image angle is greater than 90, and our image angle is less than 270, remember 270 would be straight down. And we want both of these things to be true, so we're going to put them inside another set of parentheses. So I'm looking at image angle. I've got that in its own, image angle greater than 90. I've got that in its own set of parentheses. And then I have image angle less than 270, and that's in a set of parentheses. And then I have this outside set that says, okay, so I want both of these things to be true, both of these things to be true. So basically, we're looking at the left half of a circle, maybe from like 90 to 270, if that makes sense to you. If both of those things are true, then I'm going to set my image Y scale I'm going to set that equal to -1. Remember, -1 will flip that sprite upside down. Else, I'm going to set my image Y scale equal to +1. So now we'll run the game. And actually, I'm going to hop up on here. So I've got my mouse. I'm on this circle. I have my regular sprite. His hand looks like it's down on the bottom. But as soon as I get past the right angle, now it's the opposite. So his hand always looks like it's on the bottom. It's flipping. It's kind of hard to see because it's so close. So I'm going to go into my room and I'm going to zoom my camera way in. Okay, so do you remember how to do that? We're going to need to expand viewports, enable viewports. I'm going to make my viewport 0 visible. I'm going to make my camera, I don't know what it would have to be. I don't think that's going to be proportional, but that's not working. Remember why that's not working? I'm not following my player object. Definitely following that player object. And okay, so now you can kind of see over here, we're watching the front hand, the hand that's in the front of that marker, and it's underneath the marker. But when I come around, now it's on the bottom of the marker. And it looks like he's changed hands, which, you know, might not be that realistic either. But yeah, so I think that looks better. Okay, so I am going to disable viewports because that was just kind of crazy looking. And go back to this. Okay, now we're back to normal. Okay, that is the end of part 3. So when you get that working, let me know so I can come and check it and get your part 3 grade.